Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the AAPI Communities and Conversation series, online conversation between writers, creators, librarians that centers around the Asian American and Pacific Islander voices, books, cultures, and experience. This monthly program is hosted by the University of South Carolina's Augusta Baker Endowment Chair, Publishers Weekly, and Penguin Random House Library Marketing. My name is Michelle Lee, and I am the Senior Young Adult Librarian here at the New York Public Library's Riverside Branch. I am thrilled to be here with you today, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to our very special guest, Malaka Gharib, who wrote the deeply poignant graphic memoir about growing up in a bicultural immigrant family called I Was Their American Dream. Sorry, I was American Dream. A little bit blurry. It is from Clarkson Potter. It's a spirited, heartfelt story from an expansive creator, writer, journalist, and cartoonist. It got a number of accolades. A number of media outlets had praised it as one of the best books for 2019. It was the winner of the African American Book Award, and it also made the New York Public Library's 2019 Best Books for Teens. So Malaka, thank you for joining us. Our library and publishing colleagues are really excited to hear from you. And I'll start off asking you, can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write I Was Their American Dream?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. And special thanks to Miriam and Dr. Cook for also having me. I really appreciate it. I'm here based in Nashville. Yeah, that's a great question. What inspired me to write I Was Their American Dream? I basically wrote it after the 2016, I got the idea to write it in 2016. I had heard all this sort of negative rhetoric around immigrants then, and it shocked me a lot because I didn't think that Americans, I know this is really weird and horrible to say, but I thought that Americans were cool with immigrants. I grew up in an immigrant enclave in Southern California, and almost everyone I knew was first generation immigrants. And the fact that suddenly I was hearing things like, go back to your country, Muslims are terrorists. I think I was a little too young to have felt the after effects of anti-Muslim rhetoric after 9/11. And also went to a mostly a school with a lot of people of color and a lot of Muslims. So I didn't really feel that anti-Muslim sentiment back then, but Asians, you're taking our jobs, that kind of thing. And I just felt like I would draw these comics in real time in reaction to what I was hearing in the media. And one of the first comics I drew was about my, Egyptian Arab Muslim dad. You call him a terrorist, but I think of him as a huge nerd who's really into Kentucky Fried Chicken and gardening. And that just isn't the reality that I grew up with. And as I started to draw, I realized that gosh, I have so much to say. Every cartoon actually opened itself up to another cartoon. And I was sharing all of these cartoons on my Instagram. So every time I drew a cartoon, I was like, well, wait, why did dad want to come to this country anyway? So I would, why did he want to come to the US and not settle in Europe? Or, I think his brother was living in Denmark, and he had been visiting his brother in the summer in Denmark from Egypt while he was in college to raise money. And he said that he was enamored by all the movies that he grew up with in Egypt, the American movies in Hollywood. And so that's why he had this big vision of himself wanting to live in a place like Texas, where I was born. So I felt like I just drew a cartoon about that. And then I just kept drawing these cartoons, and suddenly a friend of mine at work said oh, I've been noticing all your cartoons on Instagram. My friend is an agent. You should reach out to him and see whether you can turn this into a book. And I was like, I can't even imagine working on a book. I've never worked on a book before. I've never thought of this as a book. I thought this was just casual little doodles I was making, but he but she really seemed to believe that it could be something more. So I actually didn't email this friend of hers, this friend agent of hers for like maybe like months. And then finally she was like, yo, did you email my friend? And I was like, no, I have no idea what this will be called. And she just said, you should just write like a book called I Was Their American Dream about all your experiences being Filipino Egyptian American. And I was like, okay, if that's so easy for you, then I'll go ahead and type that. And I typed it to the agent. The agent was like, I love it. It was like literally a paragraph long. I love it. Let's do this. And that's how I was off to the races.
Wow. So it started off literally as just a couple of doodles and a conversation.
Yeah, maybe like the doodles. I think by that point it was like 27 doodles, and then it was a conversation with the agent. And I think that he could just see something that I couldn't see. Like I wasn't able to see that it was a book quite yet.
And did they come up with the title? Or did you come up with the title?
Oh, I came up with a title. I had come up with a title. I had made a separate Instagram account where I was drawing like all these little doodles about my parents and like my experience being first generation Filipino Egyptian American, including like one cousin had visited me in DC and she was like, where are all your brown friends? And I was like, oh my gosh, wait, are all my friends white? And she was like, yeah. Where are your Arab and Asian friends? And I was like, I don't have any. And why? Why do I not have any Arab and Asian friends? And so like that turned into like another comic. So every comic begat like another comic.
So how long did it kind of take for you to kind of come up with all these different comics, and what were you drawing from while you were drafting all of this?
I think after a certain point, it ended up being the publisher wanted me to write a chronological single story that would start, that would just be like encompass like my whole life and my relationship to race, to my own race. And personally, I thought like nothing racist has ever happened to me. I was very lucky to grow up in a part of America where there were lots of Filipino immigrants, like children of immigrants like me, lots of mixed people. In fact, I had a band in high school with like I was friends with a lot of half Filipino people in high school. So it wasn't strange for me to have, to be around people who were just like me. So I had assumed that, I have no issues with race, like whatever. But of course, like the more you dig, I was like, gosh, I think I have a really, really skewed, I don't think I'm very proud of being Filipino and Egyptian. I want to explore why I'm not proud. And I wasn't proud because I thought and was taught by my parents to actually remain Filipino and Egyptian, yet understand how white culture worked, because white culture was considered by them as American culture. And in order to be American, which I am, they always reminded me that you're American, you have a US passport, you were born here, you have opportunities that we never had. To be American would be to align yourself with white culture. But in the process of writing the book, I learned that actually to be Filipino Egyptian is quite American. It's quite American in and of itself by the nature of the fact that it exists. And if it exists, therefore it is. And I know that sounds like a very easy concept, but I think that I had to fully grasp and understand that statement, that I am an American too. I needed to do the emotional work to eventually come to really believe that statement. And the emotional work was done by writing the book.
So it was a learning process and a creation process.
Yeah, exactly.
How long did it take you from the conception to completion?
Yeah, it took about 2 years. I had never written a book before. I had a wonderful editor named Sarah Neville at Clarkson Potter, who was my publisher, who dutifully like worked with me. This is also, she had just started her job at Clarkson Potter too, so she was also new. So we were both kind of fumbling through this process together. And I think that I learned a lot the first time around. I've made a lot of mistakes, especially when it came to drawing and drafting the graphic novel pages. But I think we figured it out. But it took a long, it was a longer process than I expected. Yeah.
Were you doing the art digitally or by hand on paper?
Actually, I had never drawn digitally before, so I had to teach myself to draw by hand. All of the drawings I had initially made were pencil sketches that I later scanned and then traced over with the computer because I didn't have the command on how to use the stylus yet. It felt very funny in my hands, so like I just traced everything. But I eventually learned for my next book. The next time around, I just did all my drafting, you know, in on the computer with a stylus. I felt very comfortable by that time. I had upped my game. I like was using I was sitting properly in my chair. I got a better tablet. I started using a glove for my hand so I could be able to draw better. So yeah, I learned a lot in the process, and I'm so glad that I know how to use a computer now. Because I think if I was still doing things by pencil, it would have not been very good. Yeah.
When you were creating your comics, did you interview some of your family and friends while you were doing it? Did you look at your old, your old journals, your old diaries when you were kind of compiling all of your history?
Yeah, so I'm a journalist. So I by day. So I actually I work at NPR science desk. I'm an editor, and so I approached the book as if it was a journalistic piece. And so I wanted to triangulate facts about my family and my friends and my high school experience. And that required me to speak to a lot of people, including old high school friends who I'd never spoken to in 10 years, asking my parents questions I had never asked them before, like, you know, Mom, why did you divorce Dad? And then she would say her answer, and then I would triangulate the facts by asking my dad, hey, Mom said the reason why you know, you all divorced was XYZ reason. Do you agree with that? And then he would be like, well, I wouldn't quite see it that way. Then I'd have to go back to my mom and say, like, actually, Dad argues with this point and said it was more like this. And then my mom would then like correct her statement and be like, oh yeah, I guess your dad's kind of right. So it was a lot of like fact checking there. There's even this scene in high school where I draw this like social map of like my high school, who sat where in the quad and that kind of thing. And I called up 3 high school friends just to make sure that my memory served me correctly. And it was really fun, actually, getting to rekindle a lot of friendships with my old colleagues and my old classmates and family in a way where I haven't asked them those questions before. Yeah.
Were there any stories that you kind of felt squeamish about putting in or retelling to others?
Yeah, I think one of the things that made me uncomfortable was showing some of the hardship of my mom. My mom worked really hard, and she had 2 jobs and to support me and my sister, and she did ask a lot of money from my extended family in order to support me through college and like even pay for my private school tuition when I was in elementary school. And I think that I didn't want to like embarrass my mom and make her feel humiliated by exposing that detail about her life, because she doesn't deserve people to look down on her. I didn't want people to look down on her. But I think that it would have made the story less true to say that she didn't struggle as a single mom and didn't ask for help from other family. And I also felt like it was a point where other people in our situation, other immigrant children, could probably relate to what she was going through. And so for a long time, she sort of told me, please don't make me look poor, whatever. And then finally, I just like reached a point where it's like, you know what? Look around your colleagues at work, all of your colleagues at work. She works at American Airlines, and she works as a ticket agent. Many of them are like immigrants as well. And do you think it was easy for them when they first started coming here and like taking care of their children? They were also working overtime, just like you, working 7 days a week. And so, take a number. You're not really special, unfortunately. And I think once I said that, she kind of changed tactic. And actually, when the book came out and she had her friends at work read it, a lot of them came up to her and said that they had actually really they were able to relate to my mom, and said, I've been carrying these thoughts with me about myself and my situation, and like, your daughter was able to like put it very well about like my experience being a mom also. So I felt like once she heard that, she felt like her experience was validated, and she felt really proud. And she's my biggest cheerleader in terms of like selling the book. I think she sold like 50 copies to her colleagues at work.
How did your other relatives and friends react once the book was published?
I think my dad, this annoys me to this day, but he says he doesn't remember a lot of the details that I like outlined in the book. And like, I was so painstaking about like trying to make sure that I got my facts correct. So it really annoyed me that he said that, but I think for the most part, people were really happy. I think it's really, really wild. In my first book event that I did in LA, I just couldn't believe my whole family on my Filipino and my Arab side, they came out to the event, and then I just couldn't believe that our story, like our family story, was now on a bookshelf, on bookshelves nationally, like seeing it there, seeing them there, and then seeing the book there. It's like a very powerful feeling, because I felt like growing up that like we didn't quite fit in with the idea of a nuclear family in the American sense, of the white American sense. I'm putting this all in quotations. I didn't really feel like we could relate, yet here we were, a picture of what the American experience can look like. And it was a very profound moment for me. And I felt like I had done my family story justice. And I felt like I was able to, that book will be there forever. Like no one can take that away from us. It'll be archived in libraries, and our family has made a mark, in this world, and it's a wonderful feeling.
What was the best response you got from readers to your book, and what was the strangest?
I think one of the most notable responses I got, I really was writing in my mind, I was really writing for an immigrant child audience. Like I was writing for me, but I really had like other immigrant children in mind who were like around my age. And the thing is that I got a handwritten card from a white man in Iowa who was like in his 70s, who said that it was like just a wonderful, for him, it was like one of the best ways to understand race in America. And that's when I realized that like, I don't know what I thought while writing this book, but I never expected it to hit that way for people. You don't know how a book is going to be received, right? Like I just didn't expect it to be a very like striking story of race in America. I just didn't expect that. And the fact that it moved him, and the fact that it changed his mind about the way he saw immigrants, he'd written this handwritten card. It was just like really unexpected. Equally unexpected is how many schools across America, both universities and high schools, have made I Was There, American Dream a common read, like a required reading. And that also to me is mind-boggling and wonderful. And just the fact that it's being used as an example of what of a way to understand diversity in America in a deeper level, that was totally that's like icing on the freaking cake. Like I absolutely the book has become so much more than just a story about my family. It's become a political statement. It's become a statement on diversity. It's become, a window and door, as one person in the chat is saying, and it's just profound. I also really find it weird and wonderful and strange to see that people are writing academic papers about it, like, like,
Wow. You're actually being cited in academic papers? Wow.
People have written papers about the use of my photos, like the way that I draw photos in the book. People have written papers about contrasting it and comparing it with like other types of Arab American graphic novels. It's just so like, it's just totally just
You never
taken on its own life. Yeah.
The artwork is great. I mean, I love how you kind of balance this sort of like fun, comic style with the more serious content. And did you purposely decide to color everything mostly like red, white, and blue?
I actually had no idea that that was like a patriotic color scheme until like a reader pointed that out, and I was like, we absolutely did that on purpose. We didn't. We meant it to look kind of, the red, white, and blue color scheme was meant to look like old school comics that you would get like for 25 cents in the olden days. So the red, white, and blue was just like a happy coincidence. It was actually originally millennial pink, white, and blue, and the marketing team at Clarkson Potter said that millennial pink was out, so they cut that color quickly.
Yeah, it also kind of reminded me a little bit of like Roz Chast's New Yorkers kind of style, and how you also include kind of these fun aspects where you have like the bingo card and you have like the little recipe in there.
Yeah, well, first of all, being compared to Roz Chast is high praise, and so I'll take that. I think that one of the things I like about Roz Chast is that she uses very expressive lines minimally to create like a lot of emotion. So I tried to emulate that in my own work. And then as far as the games go, I think that the games for me, I wanted you to feel like you were reading my diary, and I wanted to also engage the reader in a way to put them in the same hot seat that I was in. So a lot of them are about decision making, about how to get yourself to actually put yourself in my shoes. So like, I'm in college, like what kind of style should I inhabit? And that type of thing. And it was a paper doll. Yeah.
Yeah, the various paper dolls and the outfits, and then like the passive aggressive bingo.
Yeah, exactly.
The passive aggressive racist questions bingo.
Yeah.
How did you get into comics and writing and drawing?
I actually was always a doodler. I didn't really draw formally. I didn't go to art school. But actually the book was my first foray into comics, like straight up sequential art. I'd done some a little bit. I had my own zine when I was coming up in my 20s. I created a zine called The Runcible Spoon. It was about food and fantasy, and I was the editor. And I drew little comics about that. That were food related, but I definitely never had drawn comics formally. And before I began working on I Was Their American Dream, I decided to read a bunch of graphic novels to just see, if I could sort of copy and be inspired by the style. And one of the first books I read was Mouse by Art Spiegelman and Persepolis. And I was like, there is no freaking way that I could ever be this good. And so I decided to stop reading comics. I stopped reading like comics as inspiration because they were just making me feel bad. So I tried to go into it blind with just like trying to rely on my own intuition of like what I think the book should be. And so that's why a lot of this comic style that I drew in I Was Their American Dream has like a very childlike naivete, because I definitely didn't know anything about comics back then. In my second book, I think I grasped more of the comics rules, and I've been drawing, I think now, drawn hundreds and maybe thousands of pages of comics. So I think I get it now. Yeah, I think it's safe to say.
Were there any?
I grew up appreciating and reading comics too.
Were there any comics that you were a big fan of when you were a kid or a teen?
Yeah, I think I got into indie comics as a teenager. I read Ghost World, and in my 20s, my mom sent me a subscription to the New Yorker, and that's where I first started seeing the illustration of Adrian Tomina, and then getting into his comics too, like Shortcomings and Killing and Dying. So like after reading his comics, I was like, he's probably my biggest inspiration in terms of like the level of detail in the illustration, but also the theme and tone can be pretty poignant. I think that that's using a lot of minimal dialogue and text, but letting the illustration do a lot of the talking. So I feel very strongly inspired by him. Yeah.
Are there any other comic artists that you admire, or any other fine artists, writers?
Yeah, I think that Kristen Radke, who is the author of Seek You, which was highly regarded last year when the book came out, it's a nonfiction book that blends memoir with science. And as a science journalist myself, I find it interesting to be able to use comics to tell the story. For her, she tackled the idea of American loneliness and the history of loneliness in America. And she sort of blends that in with her own upbringing, and then it sort of weaves in the pandemic toward the end. So it's just a very powerful example of what comics can be.
So going back a little bit to what you were saying earlier, as you were creating the book, you kind of felt a little bit more confident about learning about your family and your life. You'd mentioned also in the book that you kind of felt a little bit mixed when you were growing up as a kid. When did you really start feeling comfortable and proud of your unique heritage? I
think that I spent most of my elementary school and teen days lamenting the fact that I was Filipino and Egyptian. I smelled like garlic. My hair smelled like garlic when I went to school in the morning. Filipino people will know that we have longanisa burps, where if we eat longanisa, this type of sausage that has this heavily spiced sausage, we eat that in the morning for breakfast, which we do with rice. There's gonna be burping longanisa burps all day. Okay, Mylene, so you know what I'm talking about with longanisa burps. I just felt like everything was so, we were so fobby, I thought, in my mind. I was very ashamed of that. And then in my college years around white people, I didn't talk about my culture much. And then certainly in my 20s, when I moved to Washington, D.C., I didn't really talk about race at all. And I surrounded myself with a lot of white people and felt like I had, quote unquote, finally made it as a quote unquote American. So, but then I found myself really sort of missing and kind of questioning why, what was so wrong in the first place to like being Filipino or an Egyptian. And now I feel like I've wasted all these years, trying to be American, quote unquote American, when I could have been focusing on learning more about my culture and my people and my history, which we never learned in school. Learn the history of the Filipinos or the Egyptians. We learned about the Americans, and I don't know, the history of California, where I went to school, where I grew up. So only when I started working on the book did I start doing the emotional work of trying to understand, where did I make this huge left turn, and how do I get back on track to loving my ethnicity? And after I finished doing the book, I started sort of going back and reconnecting with my culture. I joined an Arabic class at the Embassy of Oman in DC, and I learned how to speak Fushat Arabic, which is a more formal type of Arabic. I learned how to read Arabic. I joined the Filipino Young Professionals Association, and I started mentoring other Filipino Americans in their career. I started hosting these Filipino potlucks with my colleagues and around town, just to get people eating Filipino food together. And I just sort of I think there's this big question about, people get often bothered about asking, what are you? And I think it's actually a really radical act to push aside. I don't see what's wrong with saying in certain contexts, in safe contexts, with screaming from the rooftop what ethnicity you are. They wanted to push that down, and now it's time for us to be loud and proud about it. This is what a Filipino American looks like. Sorry.
That's great that you've been doing all those things.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for any teens or high school students, college students who feel a little bit embarrassed by the heritage?
You know what? I actually don't think that Gen Z needs much help. I mean, I'm on TikTok. I see what they post. A lot of people are doing, there's a whole TikTok movement of like young Filipino people like sharing, you know, bits about the culture, and Arab Americans too. And it's just, they're more proud and aware of like their heritage in a way that my generation, and certainly even the generation, no, my generation, Gen Z is before this one, and my generation was never privy to, you know, like if we had only spoken more openly about that stuff when we were growing up, we would have been way more woke to our culture earlier in the game. But these people on TikTok, I mean, these Gen Z people, they like are so aware of identity and what that means to them personally and their personal growth. And they feel more rooted than we ever did. So whatever they're doing, I just say that they should keep doing it.
How do you feel about the push in some places to have Asian American history be taught in schools?
It's great. I would have loved to learn Asian American history. I had to learn it by watching the PBS documentary and being like, wow, I had no idea. I had literally no idea, because we didn't spend much time, you know, studying that when we were in school.
Or if you're probably like older, like I didn't know much until like, you know, they talk about, oh, the Chinese built the railroads, like while you're doing American history, but I didn't start learning more until like college. So
yeah, I think we learned especially because growing up in California, we had to learn California history. So like obviously there are a lot of Asians in California, so we learned about the California Railroad. We learned about like the agriculture trade, like the movement of agriculture, like workers. What else did we learn about Asian people? I don't know, but my grandparents,
over here in New York, it's like Ellis Island. And
then we did work about that.
And then it's just like Pearl Harbor, and that's kind of about it.
Yeah. And then my grandfather was a historian / journalist, and he wrote a book about the first Filipinos in the United States, and in the Americas in general. And so when I became much older, I had a real appreciation for like, wow, looks like Grandpa already did the work, so I just read his book.
You probably got home a resident since you knew it was like a family member who had done all the work and wrote it too.
Yeah, so I was like, I should probably do a lot more of that for myself.
Can you talk a little bit more about your second book that's coming out? Is this part of a trilogy?
Oh my gosh, yeah, the Malaka Gharib universe. My upcoming book I'm really excited about. It's about all the summers that I used to spend living in Egypt, and I wanted to know what did growing up there, like what impact did that have on me personally and on my worldview? And it kind of centers around trying to fit in with my dad's new family. He moved to Egypt just a couple of years, you know, before, then told me on one summer trip while I was visiting that he had remarried. And then so the whole entire book sort of spans the course of me being 9 to age 25 and trying to figure out how I fit in this new blended family, and you know, like what this country meant to me, and sort of forging a relationship with my new stepmom. So it's these vignettes throughout the years of my experience in Egypt. And ultimately, I think it's about growing up and understanding your parents. Yes, I know Oliver Wang. I went to school with him. How do you know Oliver Wang? Edward Wong. Tell him I said hi. I'm gonna go. Do you know his email address? Oliver Wang and I went to school together at Cerritos High School. Yeah, so it's about that, and I'm really excited about it. It's a little bit more serious and somber. It's more traditional as a graphic novel, graphic memoir format, and it's very pretty. Yes, I think. I'm gonna follow him right now. Soul Sides, huh?
So yeah, and I believe that's coming out this fall.
Yeah, on September 20.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll probably do virtual in-person book tour.
I actually am not going to do a book tour this year. Maybe virtual. Yeah.
So cool. So switching gears a little bit, how has it been working as a journalist during the pandemic, especially since you're working on the global health and development team over at NPR?
Oh my gosh, it's so so much. I mean, like, it's pretty heavy stuff all the time. It's a lot of breaking news. You know, that just this past winter, spring, we had like Omicron reinfections, then it was Ukraine, and then it was the abortion stuff, and then something else happened. Oh, the shootings and monkeypox. It's just like the news cycle never ends. And so I think I've actually stopped reading the news on the weekends just for my mental health, because I'm already living the news every day. So I feel like I had to just sort of take a little break. But now I'm on TikTok, so that's really productive.
Is that the way you de-stress? Watch your talk?
These days, absolutely. And it feels like really addictive. I get grumpy if I can't read it, if I can't watch it, which is not good. Probably a bad sign.
So,
oh, thank you, Yukari. I am so glad that you're reading the galley. That's great. I'd love to know what you think. Oh, you also spent your summers in Japan. That is wonderful. I love to, that's also a very wonderful and beautiful place to create a story around. I don't know if you're a writer, Yukari.
cool. So let's open this up to questions from the audience. You can feel free to put your questions in the chat, or if you want to, I don't know, or is mics enabled for this? Or is it just like school webinar style?
Wait a second. I have no idea who this Oliver Wang. Maybe it's a different Oliver Wang.
Mics are enabled, sure. Okay, great. So if you want to ask a question for our special guest, feel free to do either one. We'll take it in order. So you can put your question in the chat, or you can turn
Say it out loud.
Okay, so that is there are probably many Oliver Wangs as there are Edward Wongs. Yes, there are.
Yeah.
So does anyone have a question for our special guest?
Ask away. Although I feel like you covered
Filipino
a lot
comfort
of
food. What's your favorite Filipino comfort food?
Oh, my favorite Filipino comfort food is arroz caldo. It's like a rice chicken porridge. It has it has like saffron flavor, a little bit of the Spanish influence. It has calamansi juice, so it's a little bit sour, scallions, fried garlic, and like a poached egg on top. Not a poached egg, a soft boiled egg. And it's just so comforting and wonderful. It's like even better than mac and cheese. And it's very healthy for you too.
Linking to that, favorite Egyptian comfort food?
My favorite Egyptian comfort food is probably it's like stewed okra in tomato sauce and beef, and we eat it on top of rice pilaf, and it's just so healthy and wonderful.
Sounds cool. Do you cook any of these things yourself?
Yeah, I cook a lot of Filipino Egyptian food. My brother is from Egypt, and he's living with us for the summer. He moved here for college. He's 20. And we, you know, tonight I'm making falafel and some fool, which is our fava beans, like it's a fava bean dip. And I'm eating it with some wonderful pita bread that my brother was just in Egypt, so he brought some back. And the pita bread that Egyptians eat is like made out of whole wheat and is extremely glutinous. It's like so different from the really horrible white like pita bread that you can get at the supermarket, and it's like nutty and rich and it has semolina flour. It's just so complex. You can eat it on its own because it's that good. And yeah, we're gonna have that for dinner. And you know, tomorrow, on Wednesday, my Filipino sister is coming tonight, and so we're gonna make pancit canton together on Wednesday. Yeah,
cool. And I guess third question, favorite comfort American food?
Oh, my favorite comfort American food. Oh my God. I don't know, like a baseball hot dog, or like an LA dog, like the hot dog covered in bacon and then like with like onions on top and ketchup.
So like the hot dog with all the works.
Yeah, with all the works. I don't know why, I just love it so much. Like a Diet Coke. That's my dream. Okay, here.
Have you've lived on both coasts and now you're in the middle. Is there any part of the US you still want to visit?
Yeah, so like I live in Nashville now, which is so crazy. I live in the American South, and like you can just imagine what that's like. Actually, I don't think people know what it's like. I think people have like a really stereotypical idea of what the South is. And like, I am sure, I mean, I certainly did before we moved here. And so I made a very conscientious effort to make friends with people of color. And now I have only friends who are people of color in Nashville, which is like extremely skewed because this is a predominantly white city. But I'm not complaining. It's great. I think I have a lot to learn here in the South. I visited Atlanta once. I thought it was really cool. I'd love to visit places like Houston and Dallas just to see what the hype is all about. I haven't spent much time there, even though I was born in Texas. And I also feel like states like Montana and North Dakota or South Dakota, I like know so little about that. And I would love to just get to know about Indigenous culture a little bit more. The DMV misses me. I miss the DMV. Actually, I was just there. I was visiting DC for work last week for a full week. And I'm actually pretty surprised by how much it's exploded. There's so many more buildings than I remembered. So many more buildings. And now that I lived in DC for 12 years and I just don't know why I never left downtown. I didn't have a car. That's one of the reasons, but I could have taken like a really long train ride out to the suburbs and gotten good food. I just never did. So I regret that now that I live far away from it because the food in the DMV is so good.
I'm sorry, DMV stands for?
The DC, Maryland, Virginia area.
Got it. Okay. Sorry. Local acronym.
Yeah.
So there's a question. Hi, Malaka. I was the American dream as a half Filipino, half Iranian woman of color. I really resonated with your story. So thank you for sharing. How do you create a sense of belongingness in all the places you've lived and visited, and how do they differ from each other?
That's a really great question. I always feel like the people who are mixed have like the most complex identity questions. And you know, Jacqueline, I'm sure you'll know this for your own self, like when you visit Iran or when you're with your Iranian family and then when you're with your Filipino family, you just kind of code switch out, like in and out. And I don't know about you, but like I feel like when I'm with my Egyptian family, I'm 100% Egyptian. And when I'm with my Filipino family, I feel 100% Filipino. And it's up to them to decide whether, I'm sure they have varying ideas of like whether they think I'm like a real Filipino or Egyptian or not, but I know what I feel and I know that my family makes me feel certainly welcome. I think the hardest part about code switching between those cultures is that I don't actually tend to forget or like slip up what the rules are because you just kind of automatically know. Like one time my husband and I went to a family friend on my Egyptian side house for like a after wedding or pre-wedding. My friend was getting married, pre-wedding like get together. And my husband was like sticking by my side the entire time. And I was sitting with all the women and I was like, yo, you need to like stop sitting next to me and like sit next to the men because like, you're making all the women here feel uncomfortable. Because A, you're white, B, you're a man, and C, you need to get away from us. And I was like, well, what am I going to talk about with them? And I was like, that's not my problem. Go, bye. So it's sort of fun, like also like teaching my husband what the different rules are. And then with, I think with the Asian side, I don't know. I mean, like, I know that when I'm eating Filipino food, here's what I love to do. Then when I slip is that sometimes I'll eat Egyptian food with a spoon and fork, the way that Filipinos eat food, because I just feel more comfortable doing it that way. So sorry. Yeah.
So we have another question. Do you speak and write all three languages?
Actually, let me show you this video that I just made my brother. He's testing my Arabic, and I'm not very good at speak. I'll tell you what they are.
Sure.
So,
go ahead. You want to do it via screen share, or is this another?
No. I'm just gonna share the Instagram link, and you all can watch on your own time. But like, so I understand Tagalog 100%. Like when I hear it, like I can absolutely just tell you exactly what you said, but I cannot say anything. Like I literally cannot say, like if you ask me how to say the word banana, like I have no idea how to say the word banana. But in Arabic, it's totally different. In Arabic, I can speak a little bit of Arabic, understand a little bit of Arabic, and I have like a better sense of like like how to say, like if you ask me banana moose, I can like immediately tell you what the word is, like table, tarabeza. Like I just like I know words and I know how to put sentences together. I'm just like not as fluent in like understanding the way that I am with Tagalog. And I can also write in Arabic, but like it takes me forever to read something. So like I'll like sound it out as if I was a child. I'm sure with practice I could be much better. And then with I can speak a little bit of Spanish because I studied it in school. That's it. I mean, I wish I could speak other things fluently, but I'm not that great.
So we do have another question. Marlene says, I love your journey. I'm a Filipino American, thus the Lisa comment, and was always embarrassed by my school lunches with chicken adobo and rice. All I wanted was a ham and cheese and Doritos. As an adult, I am also diving into my Filipino culture and roots and writing about it currently. Do you have any recommendations of Filipino or Asian American literary groups that you are on, that you can learn, that are on that you learn or inspired by?
That's a great question. I definitely feel you on, I wanted Lunchables, but we couldn't afford Lunchables. hold on, I'm gonna like send you the story that I wrote on not so like I don't know very many literary clubs, but I am a huge advocate of meeting up with like Filipino people in your community and sort of starting something together, even if they're total and complete strangers, because you'll find that Filipino people, they want to just like sort of be around each other and just be Filipino together. So I wrote this story about how I started doing that at the workplace. I just sort of gathered all the Filipinos at my workplace and said, hey, like, let's like, if I bring rice tomorrow, will you like, and like sinigang, will you bring spam? And like, we can all eat together on the patio. And people were like, yeah, let's do it. And I think in terms of books, like I can imagine you just starting your own literary group together, even with Zoom, you can do it over Zoom, DIY it. You don't need to wait for anybody to like create something, just make one yourself. I remember when during ALA in 2020, I got to meet AJ Dungo, who Miriam had put on we were on a panel together. He's a Filipino American graphic novelist too. And once I found out that he was Filipino American, I like told my colleagues who were Filipino at work, hey, if I bring AJ tomorrow, will you like to the office, like would you come and just listen to him talk and like listen to him tell his story about his Filipino American journey? And everybody was like so in. They all got copies of his book, they read it, and we had this conversation together. So it's pretty ad hoc, but you can do it, DIY it. Yeah, he wrote In Waves, that's right. Yes. Oh, and Michelle, it's a very good, very good point. AAW. Yep.
Yeah, so some folks are saying thank you. We got time for one or two more questions from the audience, so feel free to ask in the chat. And I also threw in the chat the Asian American Writers Workshop. They're based in New York. I think there's another group, Kundiman.
Kundiman, yeah.
So I'll put that info in the chat as well. But does anyone have any other questions that they would like to ask, or any other thoughts they would love to share? There was, okay. Are you working on another book?
Yeah, the one that I just talked about, it won even after It Won't Always Be Like This, which is coming out September 2022. I'm not working on a book right now. I feel like I have another one. I have an idea, something that I do want to work on, but I'm still just in the early process of writing it. Yeah.
Favorite Filipino another question. Favorite Filipino or Egyptian writers?
Wow, that's a great question. As far as Filipino writers, I don't know, I'd have to say like the old classic, Carlos Bulusan, who wrote America is in the Heart. It's, for me personally, it's the story of my grandfather. It's like my grandfather's era, like the 1920s, 1930s, of a Filipino coming to America and like trying to make it. And it's so poignant and moving, and it tells a lot about Filipino American history. And it still holds up today. It's beautiful. It's very, it's like almost written in the style of John Steinbeck. a lot of like little fleeting moments. And then I would say for Egyptian writers, there's not much that's been translated to, I haven't read many works translated to English, but I just got a hold of Dina Muhammad. She is an Egyptian graphic novelist, and she just came out with an English version of her book, Shubeik Lubeik. I have to find it.
Yes, if you can find it and put in
Yeah, Shubeik Lubeik, yeah, which means 3 wishes or something, and like it's what you say to like get the genie to like, it's like open sesame pretty much. So I'm just reading that now and absolutely enjoying it. She's killing it.
Is there anything that we haven't touched that you feel important for us to know, or anything else you'd like to add?
I think that for a lot of people of color, one of the biggest, like the biggest things that drive me when I do events is just to tell, you know, the children of immigrants that like your story is so fascinating, and like talk to your parents, ask them about their history, and like you'll have yourself a book, because I'm sure everything that you will discover in that journey is like just worthy of putting on the table and worthy of writing about. So yeah, I encourage those conversations, and I always try to do like these workshops where we talk about family history, because I think it's interesting. If you're ever struggling about what to write about, if you ever want to write a book, talk to your parents. They've got some good stuff to share.
Any other advice for any budding writers or journalists out there, or cartoonists?
Cartoonists and journalists and writers. Always write for yourself. Writing is about discovery. So if you're not discovering anything in your own writing, and you're writing because you have somebody else in mind, you're doing it wrong.
And on that note, Malaka, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I just want to thank you to our wonderful hosts, Dr. Nicole Cook, the University of South Carolina Augusta Baker Endowment Chair, Publishers Weekly, and Penguin Random House Library Marketing. A very special thank you to our awesome audience for all of your awesome input and your questions. This webinar was recorded and it will be posted for future viewing. We hope that you will join us for the next AAPI Community and Conversation event, which will happen on July 5th with our guest author, Marie Myung-Ok Lee, in conversation with Lynn Nguyen from the Los Angeles Public Library. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, everybody. Thank you for joining. Bye.